Testing YouTube audio. Testing, testing. Still muted. There we are. Hello, everyone. Hello, early birds. Ugh. I'm phlegmy. I'm very phlegmy today. Oh, God. Now we got YouTube audio in the background. Ooh, there we are. Sexy Classy. Hello. Added to the list. And then I see Christina up there, too. Christine. Ooh. I feel like I need to do some vocal exercises. Christine's added to the list. Sexy Classy. Sexy Classy, you are number 5 on the list. Early birds today. We will certainly get to you today, but it's going to be a little bit, if that's okay. GBO. Oh, okay, go. There, I was going to say, there are so many acronyms that I don't know anymore. Sexy Classy, I'm looking at your link. This looks like a product that you're selling. Is that right? Yeah, website for last recommendations. So in Feedback Fridays, we typically focus more on portfolios and resumes. The goal being for mentees and candidates within the design space to grow their individual skill sets and growth. No, totally fine. Appreciate you being willing to stick your neck out there, and I appreciate you looking for feedback. I am going to close out of that particular site, and we're going to focus more on the other folks, though. But hey, appreciate you. There is no harm in asking, Absolutely stick your neck out there. Well, oh my God, look at the clock. I guess I'll invite all the people, huh? Starting stage. Here we go. Gailey, that puts you at number 5 on the list. We will certainly get to you today, though it'll be in a little bit, if that's all right. It'll probably be closer to an hour from now. Is that okay? Excellent. Man, Kaylee and Christine, I'm excited to look more in depth at your portfolios. These are both fun-looking portfolios. Actually, now I'm looking at Farwa's. Everyone's got awesome portfolios today. What's going on? And now I'm looking at Christopher's. This looks great too. And then Amo, I think you're first on the list. This one's a wild card. We have so many fun things to look at and talk about today. I'm excited. Let's see. How are we doing out there? 12 folks in the chat still? I guess I'll get my Notion notes ready. There we go. Now the folk are rolling in. Feedback Friday. Okay, first on the list we got... I have so many screens open. Yo is first on the list. Cool. Hello, everybody. There's all the folk coming in. Looking at the chat. So many of you out there. Jason S. JasonSaw.com. We're going to get started here in just a minute. And Jason S. is JasonSaw.com. Let's take a look. Cool. Cool. All right, and then after Jason, we've got Primex with a Behance link, okay? And that is probably going to do it for today. Primex, you are number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the list. So Jason and Primex, I've got you on the list. High chances we're not going to be able to get to you today. If you feel like hanging out with us and sticking around, we'd love to chat with you. But chances are we'll probably get to 6 or so today. That's usually our maximum. Looking at the clock, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Feedback Friday. This is where Tim and I invite folk up on stage, learn more about their context and who they are, and attempts to iterate and better their assets, usually portfolios and resumes. My name is Nate Bauer. I'm a product designer for a Fortune 25 in the healthcare space. I am usually accompanied by Tim. He will be here in a bit. He's running about 30 minutes late today, so he will be showing up in just a little bit. So don't worry, Tim will be coming. If it's your first time here, then know that everything we talk about today is in fact streamed on YouTube, and I've got a link here that I can pull up and then eventually plop in the chat. That means a couple of things. One is you don't have to take notes, which is awesome, so we can have depth conversations, and then you can go back and refer to anything in the YouTube channel. But the caveat with that is everything is live streamed and recorded to the greater world, which means if your resume has your phone number on it, for example, you may want to censor that before we take a look at it. Otherwise, it's being presented to the greater world out there. I think those are all the housekeeping things that I normally talk about. I feel like I sped run them, and now I've got that gut reaction like I'm missing something, but it'll be fine, right? Well, if I've forgotten anything, we will come to it along the way. Looking at the list, looks like first up we've got Yo. Yo, if you're out there, stick your hand up while I adjust my streaming settings here. Yo, welcome. How are you? Okay, before you say anything, let me validate that I'm getting my streaming sharing things here correctly. Okay, let me share that screen, and then theoretically, everybody can now see that. Okay, cool. And then if I go to this, I then have to swap to, I'm going solo today for the moment, so it means I have to do a lot of YouTube streaming shenanigans. Yo, pleasure to hang out with you and talk with you. Give me some context about yourself and what's the problem you're trying to solve. Got it. Okay. There are cool. There are all kinds of things we can talk about. By the way, very cool that you're going to be graduating here shortly. That's a huge deal. Congratulations on that. Which one? The portfolio on YouTube or here on Discord? Chat. Is everybody else able to see my live stream? It looks like, yeah, it looks like the hurdle's on your side. I'm sorry to say. There is the YouTube link. You're welcome to open that and mute the volume there, because otherwise you'll get dual audio. It will be the feedback you will get. Will There's a delay on YouTube, so it's going to be a 15-second delay if that's okay with you. But it's better than not looking at it, I guess. Are you aware that we have? I don't want to say there's two streams running, but are you are you looking at the Feedback Friday title card, or are you aware that there's like a broader? Cool, you're aware of it. All right, cool. Let's try this first. Go ahead and exit this stage, and then come back in, and then raise your hand again, and we'll see if that resolves it. If that doesn't, then we'll fall back to YouTube if that works for you. Welcome back. Any luck? Excellent. No, that's totally fine. I'm going to put the YouTube link in the chat, and then you're welcome to watch via that. It's gonna, it's not ideal, but we're gonna make it work. Cool. So let me repeat a couple things back to you. You're graduating this year. Your goal is to find an internship at an organization. Now, you mentioned design studio, which is interesting because that narrows down a couple of things, specifically team formation and what kind of designers they're looking for. So there's some positioning conversation in there for you. The target of studios that target museums is fascinating. That's my gut reaction is that is going to be a too great of niche, and you'll likely have a hard time finding that. But I love that you're attempting to target an audience there, and then narrow down the focus. So we'll talk about that as well. The main thing I'm hearing is that you're looking for like a high level review of your portfolio, not like too in depth into a particular case study, just a general overview of who you are and how people are perceiving you. Is that sounding right? Yeah, I mean, there are advantages and disadvantages. You will likely need to have those assets in digital presentation at some point readily available, a case study being the common solution for that, and that will likely be the future you end up diving down. Cool. Let's take a look at this. You've got a website here, and am I looking at the right one with the content up in the top right side, and the left side is the catalog of featured stuff? Perfect. All right, cool. Let's see. Design studios. So design studios have an interesting nuance to how they build and structure their teams. So I want to validate that your positioning targets that formation. You're at university. Have you ever had a conversation about centralized versus decentralized team formations before? Cool. Oh, and look at this. This is a presentation. I loaded up your first case study. I'm looking at what appears to be a slide deck, which is cool. Let's do this. Let's start the conversation with some high-level philosophy, and then that'll enable us to validate whether or not the direction we're heading with your portfolio meets the expectations to that of design studios. And I have no doubt that folk in the chat are like, oh God, Nate's talking about centralized environments again. So this is I'm pulling up on my screen. You'll see it in 15 seconds or so. But this is what's referred to as a centralized UX team. And this particular graphic says UX. You can just imagine it says other things as well, like product designer or UI designer. All those fit in the same umbrella. Now, centralized UX teams is one of the flavors by which organizations organize their product teams. So there's you as one of the yellow designers on this particular team, and you should note that your other teams, your other coworkers, are other designers. You don't, in this environment, typically work with other stakeholders. You're often, the UX manager says, hey, welcome to Tuesday. Here's the stuff that you're going to work on. When you're done with that stuff, let me know and I'll assign you more stuff. And then you work on that stuff and then you submit it off to the next stage of that process. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this is the team formation typically found within design studios. Not always the case, and there are a plethora of flavors that are adjacent to this. We'll talk about another one. But what's fascinating about this team formation is that, let's say you are a UX manager and you're building a product team, and then your product team has to have like additional effort. So you need to hire somebody because you don't have enough people on staff. So that's where the job descriptions come in, and that's what you're looking for when you're trying to find a job. These people have job descriptions available. Now, if you're the UX manager on a team formation like this, you typically prioritize hiring folks with specializations in some fashion. The hurdle here is, well, we've got Tina on our team, on our UX team, who's really good at accessibility. And then we've got Jim over there who's really good at design systems. So it's like, what's the skill set that our entire team is missing that we then need to hire for? And because that's the mindset typically at play in these formations, folks with specializations and niches in certain areas tend to have higher priority during the hiring process. If we were to let me pause there. Is that making sense so far? Cool. Let's, just to compare that, to emphasize the understanding here, I've next loaded up what's referred to as a decentralized team, and know that these are two different ends of the spectrum and there are flavors in between these two formations, though these are heavily the most popular. On a decentralized team, you are a product designer, but you're within a particular product team and you no longer work with other designers. Instead, you work with other stakeholders like product managers and product owners, other things like business analysts, for example. So in team formations like this, which you will typically find in more enterprise environments, these formations typically require designers to have generalization skill sets. Because there's only one designer, they need to do all of the possible things for that entire product. There's only one designer on that product, so they need to do all the things. And it's okay if they do all the things like mediocre, in a mediocre fashion, as long as they have the entire repertoire skill set. So, circling back to you, you have a desire to work in a studio. So I want to validate that your portfolio is focusing on a particular skill set, a particular nuance that differentiates you from other candidates that is deep within one category of specialization. How's all of that sounding so far? Is all that making sense? How are you feeling about that? Do you feel like you have the ability to focus on one particular skill set or area of effort that differentiates you from that of other candidates? Yeah. So this is where your target of museums, this is where I'd want to research a bit. Museums have to have some specific nuances and requirements and needs that other industries don't have. They have to have their own unique frictions. So if you're able, I would love to dive down into deeper research on what museums require and then build a skill set that models that target audience. That would position you effectively for a design studio that targets museums. That would be my next step if I were in your shoes. Any like understanding there of do you know of what friction points museums have that other folk don't have? Oh, Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's all making sense. I don't have enough knowledge or education on the museum side of things. I'll take your word for it, but at first glance, that feels like you've got some understanding there. That's awesome. All right, cool. That all said, let's take a look at some broader things here. So I'm seeing you've got a lot of projects here, and my perception was that these were individual, like this was a gallery of product that you had worked on. Then I clicked on the first one, and I'm now understanding this is more of a case study than it is a photo gallery. Is this the case with the other ones as well? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Let's see here. So we've got work. This presents your case studies. I would love to. So my perception was that these were photo galleries, and I'm fearful that a recruiter or a hiring manager is not going to understand that these have more depth behind them. If you're able, I would love to see a label on each of these projects, and then potentially tags or a short description that communicate the problems that you're trying to solve here. If I were to say this in a different way, the current perception I have of your homepage is that it's positioning you closer to that of a graphic designer than that of a UX designer. And I'm fearful that you are being positioned away from the target audience of design studios. Right. Right. Okay. Well, I may have missed. I may have missed your target title. Were you wanting to target UX or was it something else? Yeah, like graphic design. Oh, okay. Cool. So this is actually positioning you closer to your goals than I had originally thought. So that, yeah, if your goal is positioning toward graphic design, I think you're well headed in the right direction. Now it's with the additional effort I would then want to see is how you incorporate validation that the process that you go about solving these problems mimic and meet the expectations to that of the problems businesses are trying to solve. So I'd love to learn more about your process here. And you've got some of this here as I'm scrolling through. Target audience. This looks like, oh, I thought it was empathy mapping, but it looks like it's something else. Foundations, term two. But there is process here, and I'm potentially not the target audience to understand it. And maybe design studios and museums are. The other preface that Tim and I usually talk about is if one's goal is targeting graphic design, neither of us have expertises in that area. So take everything I'm describing here with that grain of salt, and that I don't have a full understanding of the target audience to your portfolio specifically. Let's see. How are you feeling so far? So, at a general high level overview, I think you're doing a lot of things correctly. You focus on your gallery. If one's goal is graphic design, you showcase that well and you present them well. If you were looking to elevate and then potentially get inside, man, see, for a design studio, the business problem solving isn't as required because a lot of that is done at different roles. Like the UX manager solves a lot of that business process and then hands you off the tactical output hurdle. So it doesn't matter as much for the design, the graphic design realm. Yeah, this is where my ignorance kicks in. I just don't know enough about the graphic design space. How are you feeling so far? Do you feel like you've got any sort of actionable or takeaways yet? Okay. Okay. There's when we look at UX prominent portfolios, we typically talk about three target audiences: recruiters, hiring managers, and then future peers. I don't know enough about the recruiters and the hiring managers in your space. Future peers, on the other hand, is kind of interesting. So the objective with future peers is the most prominent method of getting hired at an organization is not through application, it's through referrals and knowing somebody that already works there, it's a dramatically more effective method of entering an organization and getting employment. So it's those folk that we're trying to target with the future peer category. And there's a couple of things we can do there, but if the recruiters and hiring managers are focused more on like how you solve business problems and how you break down things into smaller pieces, what's your process like, the future peers or those referrals care much more about who you are as an individual. The goal there being like, if I hang out, if we share a cubicle wall for 8 hours a day, are you going to make my life miserable? Are you enjoyable to be with? Are you just going to be fun to work with? So that's where the about page kicks into play. And there are a bunch of different things. When I refer to about pages, I usually describe them as being closer to that of a dating profile than I do of a professional document. The goal there being like, hey, throw some pictures of yourself so I can showcase my individualism and my personality. I can showcase that I'm enjoyable to work with. So hobbies of yours, interests, pictures about you, showcasing your personality. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you've got some feasibility to expand your about page and showcase some of who you are? Yeah, advantages and disadvantages. Like we would certainly argue to not put faces on resumes. You are totally okay not putting your profile photo on your portfolio, though no, it comes with at the sacrifice of being able to feel like there's a connection before we talk one on one in an interview, and that has some consequences. Overall, I think you're doing a lot of things right. I would focus on making sure your portfolio items here are labeled correctly and titled, and that you're communicating there's more stuff behind there so the users know that click on those. And then focusing on some about page and bringing out some personality. And then I would also, in your shoes, challenge everything I'm saying with somebody else on ADP list who focuses and specializes in graphic design, and then have them challenge everything I'm talking about. Okay. I did not notice the toggle button. What's the problem you're trying to solve with it? Ah, I think you're describing that the toggle could be utilized as a filter for your gallery, and then you can. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I love that idea. Personalizing what content a target audience views is a phenomenal approach, not just in design, but marketing as well. If you've got the ability to do something like that, that's great. Perfect. Cool. Yo, appreciate talking with you. Really appreciate you being willing to be the first one on here, and then would love to chat again. If you want to make any alterations, we can take a look at it again and continue chatting. Yeah, my pleasure. Take care. All right. Next on the list, starting with graphic design. That's always the graphic designs are tougher ones for me. I have less experience there. Hans, where are you? Hans, if you're oh yeah, you're on top of it. Invite to speak. Hans, welcome. Happy Friday, man. How are you? Right on. At first glance, it looks great. But tell me about, you always give me some context. Who are you and what are the problems you're trying to solve? Nice. Okay. By the way, I love the story you're telling there. I don't know. So you're targeting senior level roles. I don't know of a single senior portfolio that showcases the double diamond process on their portfolio. Phenomenal for entry level and folk that are new to the industry. And as a teaching tool, double diamond I still would argue is foundational, but it's just not like super appropriate to modern workflows in a day-to-day atmosphere, particularly if one's goal is enterprise healthcare. Enterprise, is that sounding right? Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Yeah, we're talking the same language. I currently work in enterprise healthcare, and this is my jam. Cool stuff, man. So if I were to repeat that back to you, you're just looking for an overview on this particular case study as a priority, and then validating like the perception that somebody has of you and how this case study is positioning you. Nice. When you say it looks better, am I currently showcasing it in full desktop, or are you thinking a bigger screen even then? Enhance. Yeah, there they are. Okay, cool. Yeah, we can take a look at it in this view. And then, and I'm also hearing that you're working on this and there may be some UI fiddling along the way, and that's all right. All right, cool. Let's take a look here, man. Designing a modern appointments, minor typo there, but you're in draft stage. Designing a modern appointments. Oh, maybe it's not a typo. Modern appointments experience for 10x health. Yeah, it's just a funky sentence, but you're right. That is grammatic. Do company 10x health. So when I'm looking at case studies, particularly for senior folk, I'm looking to have three questions answered. And question one is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And it looks like you've got like section number one here, ignoring housekeeping stuff, and I'm stoked you have that. Question number one here is understanding the problem. You're clearly targeting that. Question two is, how did you go about solving the problem? I imagine that's the majority of your case study. And then section three is, how did you validate success that the problem was solved? And that's where we dive into like the metrics and the impact. And I think I saw you've got that section as well. I don't care as much about that section if you're not targeting senior, but knowing that you are, I think your mindset's totally in the right pace there. Okay, so there's a couple of things we can talk about here. Where are my notes? I want to talk about storytelling. There's a trick we can do with your titles. Design requirements. I love that you're building a visual differentiation to your textual content. Like lists are such an easy example of like, hey, it could be a boring list, but I need to visually differentiate it. Even though it's not a graphic, it's still visually presentable. I think that's huge. Database discovery. Okay. Yeah. Gaining alignment across teams. By the way, stakeholder management. This is a massive section for senior level and above portfolios. Just having a section dedicated to like here's their constraints that the team was working with and how I resolve those team constraints. That is already positioning you at a higher level. Features and solutions. Cool. Appointment summary. So here are the individual features. Great. Layout. Okay. Cool. What was the target title you were looking for? UX, UI, anything like that? Product designer. So the higher elevation even. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. Well, let's talk about that. I've got a couple of things on my list here. So let me start off with saying you're doing a lot of stuff really well here. Your visual presentation here is super clean. I don't usually talk about the aesthetics that much. I usually don't care, particularly if you're targeting product design, which is much more dedicated to that of like business problem resolution than that of aesthetic UI output. So normally I don't even talk about it, but you're also doing a great job here of displaying this content very succinctly and very cleanly. Let's talk about storytelling a bit. So the the problem that I think the common friction that these case studies have is that the folk that read through these case studies, hiring managers and recruiters, they don't read them. Though the hurdle is their usual process is they'll load up your case study, they'll skim through them, and they'll stop at a section that they like, and they'll maybe read that section, and then they'll continue skimming. Not too different from the what you watching me skim through this. So the hurdle becomes, how do we design a case study that is still consumable for that of skimmers and fast scrollers? And that's where a little bit of storytelling and titling comes into play. So let's start with title number one, designing a modern appointments experience for 10x health. When it comes to storytelling, your mindset's totally in the right place here, like designing a modern appointments experience. You could have labeled this the application itself, like the name of the SaaS app that you were working on, and you didn't, which is the right call. And your mindset's clearly in the right place of like, well, what's the hook to the story? We may be able to optimize this slightly, and instead of describing what it is, describe the benefit that the benefit and the outcome of the application. Let me just ask you, like, if you were to summarize the value that in a single sentence, if you were to summarize what value was gained because of your project here, are you able to give a single sentence to that? It could be either. If I were to give you a bad example that needs iteration, it would be something like increasing conversions by 12% with a redesigned flow, something like that. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Yeah. No, that's huge. And I mean, clearly talking, like hearing you talk about the project you're working on, for the folks in the chat, these are like very typical average conversations for enterprise shenanigans. Love where you're coming at with this. Yeah. So my mindset, like I heard you talk a little bit. I don't even remember what you said now. It was something like scaling HR ability to gain X value, right? So something like that. But I think you get the mindset there. And I can showcase this in a different way. So knowing that folk are primarily skimming through your case study, let's take a look at the titles of individual sections here. So like you've got a title here that says understanding the problem. I'm going to ignore this specific paragraph because every case study is looking for what's the problem statement that I need to read. So now let's go down to design requirements. The hurdle with design requirements is if folk are skimming through the application, they're usually only reading the titles. And I don't have a quick understanding of the process and story that you're trying to tell if I were to only read the titles. So we'll want to utilize these titles to embrace that story. And a common trick that Tim and I use, and Tim, welcome to the chat. For folks who haven't been introduced to Tim before, this is Tim, my co-host, and he and I do this every Friday. One of the tricks that Tim and I use is we'll often look at the first sentence of your paragraph and then utilize that as the title. So we could say, let's see, meeting with a variety of stakeholders, the overarching goal was to significantly improve upon the UX of the white label portal we used before and safely surfaced data from out EHR. Maybe not the storytelling title I'm looking for. Well, I'm looking to summarize the section beneath it then. Are you able to quickly describe, like, let's see, do you have a testimonial in here? That's okay. That's okay. Are you able to quickly summarize the findings of this section? Got it. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense at a high level, but healthcare is so complicated, man. Here's a bad title that I've written that I hope emphasizes the point here. The backend requires more discovery than users have time for. So if they were to only read that title, they should still have a generic understanding of that entire section. And then theoretically, if every section follows that principle of summarizing the stuff below it, a skimmer, a recruiter, a hiring manager that only skim your case study should still understand what your process was and how you maybe thought about business problems, even though they didn't read the entire thing. How's that sounding? Is that making sense? Yeah, the storytelling is so cool. There's another trick I want to showcase here, and I haven't looked at it here. Have you ever utilized Notebook LM before? Have you heard about it? We're using it in a weird way today. The Notebook LM is a Google product. It's designed more for like data consumption, and then an LLM is trained on just the data you upload it, and then you can ask it questions and have it generate stuff just based on that data. In your case, all I did was I linked it directly to your case study, and I hit the slide deck button. And I'm just having it generate a slide deck. The goal of this is we can now see how the AI would have told the story that you're trying to tell. And the benefit for you is you can now like take a look at the story and then in your own time attempt to iterate and see if there are any particular things you can steal from that flow. The preface here being that all the imagery will be fabricated, but I want you to pay most close attention to the flow in which it presents data and like how it tells that story. And it's so good at that presentational stuff. So like if I go to slide 2, transitioning from a white label platform to a custom built patient experience. And then it's got some stuff. Designing a major new feature within complex backend data constraints. Balancing 4 distinct sets of requirements. Are you recognizing like the terminology used here? It's so good, right? It's such a clever storytelling cheat code. So FYI, a Notebook LM, totally free to use. It's got, I think it has some generation stipulations per day. Like I think you only do 3 or something per day, unless you pay for Google services. But yeah, that it's a utility you can use in your free time to quickly iterate your own storytelling. Beyond that, man, oh, success metrics. That's right. So we talked about storytelling, success metrics, Notebook LM, and then beyond that, I want to cover your metrics at the end. You had mentioned that you were struggling to get metrics. Is that sounding right? Yeah, Tim and I are going to make a video about this someday. So you're targeting senior level roles, and the ability to validate impact and outcome along the way will be something that senior level folks hiring for senior level roles will be looking for. There's a couple of things we can do here. So one is, let's assume for a second you do have access to that. We will be looking for a tease of that impact section at the top here. So like in your housekeeping, you've got context for the company, the challenge you're trying to solve, and then right under that, like here are just a few success validations. So if we could get access to that, this is a little teaser, and then you'd have more depth at the very bottom. So if you don't have access to this, then there are other things. There are other things we can try to look at to gain access to some of this. Let me pull up. Cool, here we are. This is a rough model, and I'm still trying to figure out how to best present this model and communicate how this works. So bear with me a little bit here. The If we look at success metrics on a graph from like purely aesthetic, or another way, like they're not valuable at all, to full value, there are different things we could utilize to like showcase momentum is being made in the correct way. Now, I've got revenue here. If you have metrics that are dedicated to like, I increased conversion by 12%, that's like highest value, top level metric you could possibly get. And if you've got access to that, great. A lot of us don't. And in your case, it sounds like you don't have access to a lot of that stuff. And that's where we go to some of these other fallbacks. The fallback that I argue is directly behind this, still high value, but more achievable than revenue, is outcomes and behavior change. So you had described this application wasn't it's a brand new thing, and you're pivoting away from solution A to showcase this new solution B. Is that sounding right? My God, you and I are like, we're kind of mirrors. The main project I've been working on over the last 3 years is outdating the software Palantir and then replacing it with new internal software. You and I have very similar stories. The outcomes. So instead, what you potentially have more ability to do is describe the new behavior changes that have occurred thanks to the value that you provided. So, for example, in my space, we're outdating Palantir, we're replacing applications. One of the behaviors that I'm utilizing to validate momentum is my success metric is users no longer require to utilize Excel to communicate with other analysts. So that's like a very specific outcome and behavior change that, while it's not a hard metric, it's not a hard number, is still guiding momentum, that the correct momentum and effort is being spent. But there are other behaviors. Like if we dissect your case study here, I bet you we could find behavior. So you've got a features section, and features are lower on that priority list. But like, let's take a look at one of these features here. Let's go to the first one, features and solutions. Visit instructions. What's the outcome that a user gained because you built this visit instructions feature? Dude, that's huge. So it's like typically I hear what the folks say and then try to regurgitate it back in like a benefit method. You kind of already did a lot of it for me, I feel like. Like if you were to have written down in the impact section just that, there aren't any metrics associated with those, but that's still behavior change that's occurring that I think is totally valuable to add to your outcome section. I think that's huge. Yeah, I'm also like real familiar that in the healthcare space, getting some of these hard metrics is so hard because you're like having to. How many applications do your users use on a daily basis? None of which talk to one another. Brutal, man. Yeah. Hey, I'm looking at the clock. How are you feeling about all of this so far? Do you feel like you've got some takeaways? Yeah, I feel like we did a lot of critique. You're kind of killing it in a lot of ways. This is a phenomenal case study. There are other things we can talk about, but Tim and I typically focus on like what are the top three things that you could use to build momentum right now. And I think once you, like, if you solve the outcomes in the storytelling section here, I think the rest of it becomes like optimization shenanigans. Like, it's already really good, and now it's just like working a little bit at a time and making it slightly better. You're doing great, man. Really appreciate you hanging out. And I think your case study is pretty well positioned at a senior level. Yeah, appreciate the time. Tim, welcome. I don't even know. Let me take a look here at Figma. Next, Farwa is next. Yeah, take over. I don't want it. Farwa, I'm looking at your resume. There is some personal data on there. It doesn't look like you have your phone number, but are you okay showcasing your resume on YouTube Live? Yeah, it looks like it's just the email. It doesn't look like there's anything else that's sensitive on there. Okay. Plus, it's already public and live on your website anyway, so it should be fine. Resume looks nice. Aesthetically, looks great, yeah. Not once. Yeah, I think that's the right call. I would love to take a look. Just want to validate again that there's no sensitive data on that. Like that one may have your phone number on it if that's what you use for ATSs. I've written down a couple of things here. I want to start with an overall principle here that will be that'll affect both this resume and the ATS designed one, And that's the amount of content that there is on here. So the quandary with ATSs that we're trying to solve is they are they are used as filtration utilities to validate the percentage of key phrases that are similar to that of the job description. It looks at job description A, person A, what's the Venn diagram of what are referred to as KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities. How much overlap is there? And those with the highest overlap get ranked closer toward the top. Now, the one of the quandaries with that particular mindset is it's determined usually by the amount of content that one has on a resume. Like we can take your current word count and then maybe optimize it, sure. But there are other candidates you're competing with 3 times more bullets and 3 times more content than your resume has. Therefore, high chance that they'll be ranked of a higher priority than yours. We just need to add content to your resume. How are you feeling about the ability to expand this work experience section, the most important section of your resume? How do you feel about your feasibility to add several bullets underneath each of these descriptions? Tim and I have talked about this in the past, and I have heard I have heard a conflicting approach as of late, but Tim and I are currently under the stance that 2-page resumes is totally okay. That the once the once mindset of 1-page resumes is a rule of times when folks printed resumes and no longer directly applies to the common market. We think 2 pages is fine. Heck yeah. There are a couple other things here I want to talk about. Let's talk about job titles because you're doing something interesting that I haven't frequently seen. Let's look at title number 1, product designer for Pruki, and then underneath that, you have what I would argue are closer to like tags: e-commerce, remote, contract. Uh, there are a couple of things here. One is no need to add them. Like if you do want to add those tags, let's add them as descriptions within the bullets themselves. But there's another quandary with doing something like that is one, you're not utilizing them in a consistent method. So if you look at the job title immediately below it, you now have location as a part of it, which is kind of a tag, I suppose, but is really information more dedicated to that of like the role itself and not the description of the job. So it's like we're training users to read them in an unusual way. But the other hurdle here, and I think the more important one, is that as you apply for jobs, have you gone through the process of you go to a job application and you say, hey, let me upload my resume and I'll fill out the application for me? Have you had that process yet? Yeah. Yeah, that's sounding right. Yeah, those machines are just not that sophisticated yet, and they'll get confused by things like that. So yeah, it sounds like you already have familiarity with the problem. Cool. And then Tim talked about location here. This is an odd one, and this is an area of nuance that has some like it's a rabbit hole of interesting conversation, and yet all of it together, I don't have a strong opinion of which way one should go. The problem that we're trying to solve here now is you have location under some of your job descriptions, and then some of them you also have remote. The quandary now is the employer doesn't know where you are because some of these positions are remote and some of them are not, and they just don't know where you live. So if you did want to add location, you would add it at the very top section, potentially underneath your name next to product designer. So it'd be Farwa Babar, product designer, Ontario, Canada. If you did want to add the location, that's where I would do it on top of the locations for your individual job titles. Your ATS specific resume, I want to validate a couple of things. Single typeface on that one. Perfect. Single typeface, one column, color, all just black and white, really. The black would be the safer way to go. My own resume uses some gray, and I have to fix it. The quandary that I think Tim is probably about to describe is that most of the time these ATS systems are sophisticated enough that in taking a PDF, it'll understand that a lot of it's just generic typography that I can parse regardless of the color. Some of the systems are less capable and they parse it closer to that of like a screenshot, in which case the character recognition becomes harder if they're a lighter color. It seems like a lot of work. Go for it. Yeah, I wanted to look at dates on education and then potentially condensed skills section. Those are the last two things. Feel free to bleed that. Perfect. Hey, how you feeling about all the feedback so far? Do you feel like you've got some good takeaways that you can use to iterate this and then maybe come back another time and we can take another look? Right on. Hey, pleasure talking with you. Really appreciate you being willing to show off your resume and showcase the stuff you're working on. All right, next on the list is Christine. And then next after her would be Kaylee. And then I'm looking at the clock. Kaylee will very likely be the last person we end up speaking with today. So Jason and Primex, I was correct. You will. We won't have time to chat with either you today unless either Christine or Kaylee have taken off already. But appreciate you trying to throw your hat in the ring there. Folks in the chat, if you want to have your stuff reviewed in the future, come by. We do this every Friday, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, though that will change here in the upcoming future. Oh, Tim, I didn't announce that at the beginning. I should have done that. Real fast. The To get your stuff reviewed, you add it to the chat. Today we had 4 entries in the chat, close to 30 minutes early. So the demand is growing, and you got to get here real early if you want to get your stuff reviewed. Just FYI out there. Tim and I are Feedback Fridays, 10 a.m. Tim and I will be adjusting that moving forward. We are now moving toward for 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for the moment. Tim, you have any more insight about 2 hours? If you're in Yeah, if you're outside the United States or if you live in Arizona or Hawaii, then if you live in Arizona or Hawaii, it's going to be 2 hours ahead. No, it's going to be 1 hour ahead because daylight savings time is it's so hard, man. Hey, this is the right time to advertise. We have Luma events. It'll do the math for you. So if you're on Design Buddies here, you can take a look at the events channel and just subscribe to those events, and then all your problems are solved. I don't know if we clarified it, Tim. We're the problem. Cool. Shall we take a look at shall we take a look at Christine's portfolio? Yeah. Yeah, there is some high level stuff that I do want to talk about, Christine. So the you were describing, man, I wish I could go back in time and listen to you describe it again. There were some potential frictions in what your goals are to what the target infrastructure you were looking for. So, for example, you were mentioning you want to work at an agency, but you also want to do more research. You've been a solo designer for a bit, and you're looking to work more on a team. Is all of that sounding right so far? Yeah. Cool, 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 cool. Okay, the very first conversation I had, I showcased centralized environments versus decentralized environments. Did you happen to did you happen to watch that, or would you like to talk about that again? Yeah, let me showcase some high level things then. Tim, I'm going to take over some screen shenanigans. We'll see. Just give me some time. I want to showcase the entire screen, and that means I have to go to my streaming software and swap it to Nate hosting. And now everyone can see and YouTube can see. A lot of buttons on my side of things. So, Christine, there are different formations and team environments that organizations use to build their product design processes and teams. There is Well, here, let's just cover high level first. So, there are a bunch of different flavors of these formations. I want to showcase two of them. These are by far the more uh, popular ones, but know that there are other flavors in between these. These are ends of the spectrum here. So this is a centralized UX team. And the reason I'm showing centralized first is this formation is typically more found in that of agency environments. Not always, not all the time, but this formation, if you were to find yourself in it, likely you're in an agency. And this is you here as a designer, and you now hit your goal of working with other designers and really honing down craft. Super cool there. There's some consequences with this environment, and that is the typical flow and structure by which these teams process is that you've got a UX manager, and the UX manager says, Christine, welcome to Monday of Work. Here's project A, B, and C that you need to work on. I'm going to assign you these tasks, and then you're going to do these tasks. And when you're done, let me know, and I'll assign you more tasks. And in those phases, you can often feel a little bit like a button pusher. You had mentioned that you want to dive down deeper research. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because you typically don't do much research in these categories. Or if you do research, it's at a much higher elevation level. It's a much shorter time frame. And then when you do build the output, you typically pass it off to another development team, and then you're not ingrained in the end result or the outcome, and you don't get experience or test and validate anything along the way. So in these environments, if your goal is like to dive deeper in research, I don't know that this environment is the right call for you, or for studio environment is the right call for you. Let me pause there. Is all of that making sense so far? Okay. But if the higher priority is working with other designers, this is the right call. And agencies are phenomenal for that, particularly for honing craft. If one's goal were to have more control over the entire experience, and then if I were to repeat something I heard back to you, be a more generalist in nature, like being able to do the research and also being able to do the design and then the testing and validation and own the entire process of all UX, then the decentralized UX team will likely be a better fit for you. And so this is in this formation, this is here as a UX designer, and now instead of working with other designers, you're now embedded on a product team. And your coworkers are now that of product managers and developers and other stakeholders like business analysts, things like that. But know that you don't typically work with other designers. There can often be like a single other designer on a product team, but you're no longer working with a team of designers. So really awesome if your goal is like diving down deeper research and deeply understanding a particular product and finding the result along the way and then iterating that product over years at a time. Phenomenal team formation for that. Less phenomenal for experiencing what other designers are working on and then learning from them and then growing skills in other in other verticals of design. Generalism, this formation is fantastic. Hearing all that, how are you feeling so far? Do you feel like one of these environments is more applicable to your mindset and goals? Hmm. Yeah, totally feel where you're coming from. It sounds like in re- it sounds like you're describing a particular product team that had frictions in other ways beyond that of just the theory of how teams are formed. So it sounds like and this is often the case with startups too. Like it's very likely your startup looked like a formation similar to this. Is that right? Yeah. So the quandary with centralized environments is that they don't scale super well. Like at some point you'll hire more designers and now you got like 40 designers under one person. That doesn't work. So now you need to break up the teams into smaller pieces. So it's often the case that mid-level companies start with centralized teams and then eventually mature into decentralized UX teams. All that to say, like neither of these are the correct solution. They all have advantages and disadvantages, and it sounds like your team was experiencing some of the more disadvantageous versions or disadvantageous factors of a decentralized team. That's a bummer. It's a bummer you weren't able to dive into more of the entire UX process and that you found yourself pigeonholed in more tactical stuff. Yeah. Yeah, and there are other flavors in between, but when it comes to looking at job descriptions and trying to say like, "Hey, I don't want to apply for that job because that's the wrong team formation," really hard to do. And instead the tactics, like impossible to do. You just don't know how their teams are formed. So instead, Tim and I would argue the better tactic is to position yourself closer toward one of these, and then you apply for a bunch of jobs, and the ones that interview you have perceived your portfolio as stronger to their flavor of formation. And that's the usual way we go about it. So now it's a positioning problem. Okay, cool. Tim, I'm going to pass the screen share back over to you. And then typically the outcome of this conversation, Christine, is that like, hey, we choose one of these and now we validate which, which of these flavors your portfolio is better suited for. I don't know that we have a strong opinion yet on which one of these it should be targeting. So I think all of that, all of the last 5 minutes of conversation, I think that's all general philosophy for you. And then as you mature and as you grow in the industry, keep it in mind as you potentially lean one way or another. That's the one I've had pulled up, and I have some notes on it, but I'm also looking at the clock, and we just don't have time to dive deeply into it. Are you okay coming back for another session and we can take a look at your case study next time? Yeah, that would be perfect. And then also, if you are on a timeline or you don't get in next Friday, for example, if you're on a timeline, both Tim and I do mentoring outside of this. So feel free to connect with me on ADP list, or feel free to connect with Tim on his Calendly link linked in his profile. Feel free to reach out to either of those. Yeah, I really appreciate the time. Appreciate you hanging out with us. All right. Final up. Kaylee, if you're out there, put your hands up in the air. This will be the last review we have time for today. If you're new here, we do this every Friday, 10 a.m. Oof. Every Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Regardless of time change next week, Feedback Friday is being pushed an hour later, depending on your time zone. And we will be moving forward with 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Jason, I'm so sorry. I've got you on the list. I mentioned you earlier. You were next on the list, and we just don't have time for you today. Well, if you want to come back next Friday, make sure to be first on the list, and would love to chat with you in the future. Also, feel free to reach out to either Tim and I on your own time as well, and we can maybe set something up if you're on a timeline. Those are the housekeeping things. Gailey, welcome. Kaylee, I theoretically hear some sound. It sounds like it sounds like you're 40 feet away from your microphone. Is it possible it's like stacked under some newspapers, or newspapers, like people? Oh, that's better, yeah. Were we in your pocket? Is that what was happening? Excellent. We can hear you great now. Tell us a little bit about you and what the problem you're trying to solve is. Well, I gotta tell you, I'm looking at case study number one, and this might be, I don't want to overhype it, but this might be the status quo of what I'm looking for in every case study. This might be the lead example. The storytelling here is phenomenal. Your titles are great. You're summarizing the content of your titles in a playful manner. The imagery that you have is tasteful and executed well. You've got animations on there. You also have impact. You've got metrics in your bottom section, which is hard to find for particularly that of entry level candidates. Kaylee, if you had not told me your goal was entry level jobs and that you were an undergrad, I would have assumed you were targeting a high, mid to senior level positions here. The storytelling here is impeccable. And frankly, I'm happy to look through this more and I'll do so. But I don't think I'm going to have a whole lot of feedback for you of optimization strategies. I think you're doing a phenomenal job. Tim, this is an awesome reminder that we need to have like a top chart list of some kind that we keep track of. I agree with all of that. Kaylee, there is one section that I have found that I think is missing that I would argue is paramount to your goal of targeting UX positions. So, first I want to say your case study clearly doing a lot of things correctly. I was going to argue we were at an optimization phase that you're doing like everything perfectly. I think now that there's one missing section that is actually a real problem. So Tim, if you scroll down a bit, we will find that there is a section dedicated toward the problem that the users are trying to solve, and then we dive immediately into how might we's, and then ideation, and then into solution. So the target you're looking for is UX, and UX is dedicated toward the ability to break down problems, user problems, into smaller pieces. The section that I think here is missing is the process by which you've delineated these user problems and then focused flow. So, for example, you go from ideation, and I would have perceived that ideation is the process section, but then immediately after ideation, you dive right into what the final output looks like. The process section that I'm looking for is missing some things. So, for example, how did you go about understanding who the user was? How did you define the problem space? Was there any sort of mapping of the experience that you were attempting to build? How did you prioritize and scope what portions and features you wanted to focus on? It's that section that I think is missing, and I think it's really prominent. I think it's a real problem that it's missing. Let me pause there. How are you feeling about that so far? Do you feel like you may have the ability to go back and then add on that section? Yeah, no, I think that's true. Uh, Tim may disagree with me, although maybe not. I'm a fan of really long case studies. I think the more scrolling, well, I mean, to a point, but I think long case studies are the correct sacrifice to communicating enough information. The sacrifice of a short case study is, yeah, people can see all of it quickly, but if you're missing a section like the process, I think it may be a deal breaker for a lot of folk. Whereas a long case study, there are fewer deal breakers typically at play. Tim, check out the About page. Gailey, your quality keeps on giving here. This is one of the best About pages I've seen. You're doing so many things correctly. There's just so much personality on this screen. Kaylee, how are you feeling so far? Are there Tim and I have there are I think the UX process missing on the case study is probably the big thing and potentially like I think that's really the main priority of the conversation. Are there any other problem spaces that you think is a friction point that we should focus on? Because if not, I don't know how much more value we could provide. I don't think there's a problem with that at all. Tim, go ahead. Folks, that's going to be Feedback Friday for today. If you're new here, we do this every Friday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We go for 2 hours. Time change is next week. We will be doing this with the new Pacific time change, but also pushing it an hour out. Could not be more confusing. Tim and I have talked about whether or not we want to do it now or later. Our hand is forced, and it just happened to align accidentally. So know that after the time change is already done, it's going to be at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Would love to see you all in the future. If you want to get here early to have your resume or portfolio showcased, show up. Normally I say 5 to 10 minutes early. Today it was 25 minutes early. So you want to show up early, add your resume or portfolio link to the chat, and that guarantees you get a spot on the review for that Friday. Tim, any last words? Any last things before we say goodbye to our friends?